Well, hello, friends. My name is Matt. I'm the youth and family pastor at Cornerstone Church, and I'm here today with your Cornerstone Connection, a daily devotional. I'm sure at some point in your life, whether it was a parent, a teacher, or a coach, they gave you a command, and whether you listened or not, they commanded you of that, gave you that same command again. They repeated themselves, right? And why is that? Well, because they thought it was important. They knew that you needed to hear it more than once, and they just wanted to make sure because they truly believe in what they are saying, and you need to hear it twice or three times or five times, whatever it is. Well, I found today in one of my favorite passages, 1 Thessalonians 5:16 to 18, where Paul lays out the will of God to the Thessalonian people. He tells them to do three things. And what I noticed was he tells the Philippian church to do the same three things in chapter 4, verses 4 to 7. And it's like Paul basically repeats himself. But what I love is in Philippians 4, he kind of adds more to it of why this is God's will for us. So I'm going to read 1 Thessalonians 5:16 to 18 first, and then we'll go to Philippians 4. So join me there. Paul says this. He says, "Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, for this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you." Plain and simple, right? This word will, if you look in the Greek, it's not this plan, this roadmap that God gives you, and if you take the wrong step, all of a sudden you're out of God's will, and He doesn't love you anymore, and shame on you. No, this word means desire. This word means pleasure. This is God's desire for you. This is what He wants for you. This is what He wishes for you. He desires and wishes and wills that each of us would rejoice always, in every circumstance, in every situation, that we would pray without ceasing, that we would continue this dialogue with God, this talking to Him, this hearing from Him, this reading His Word and soaking it up, and then that we would give thanks in all circumstances. That means the circumstances that have us on top of the mountain peaks. That means circumstances that have us down in the deep, low valleys. That means the circumstances of the mundane day-to-day, that we'd be thankful in all of them. And Paul says, this is God's will for you. This is what He wants for you, that no matter what, you rejoice always, you pray without ceasing, and you give thanks in all circumstances. Well, like I said, in Philippians chapter 4, verses 4 to 7, Paul says the same thing to the Philippians. He just adds more to it. And what I love about it is that we get the reason why. Paul says, hey, do these three things, and we get the reason why this is God's will for us. It's really neat. So join me there in chapter 4, verses 4 to 7. Paul writes this. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Now, hopefully, you heard those same commands that Paul gave in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, 16 to 18. Maybe you heard them in Philippians 4. Did you catch it in verse 4? He said, "Rejoice in the Lord always," right? And in the other text, it said, "Rejoice always." In verse 6 of Philippians 4, he says, "But in everything by prayer and supplication." And 1 Thessalonians, he said, "Pray without ceasing," right? In Philippians 4, verse 6 again, he says, "But with prayer, by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving." There's that being thankful in all circumstances that he talked about in 1 Thessalonians. So we see this repetition, right? And Paul says this should be the life of a Christian. It's not just for Thessalonians or Philippians, but it should be for all of us, that we rejoice always, pray without ceasing, we give thanks in all circumstances. But why? Why is this God's will for you? And verse 7 of Philippians chapter 4 is our answer. I love it. He says, "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding." You and I can't understand the peace of God. "But the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and will guard your minds in Christ Jesus." Paul says, rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances. And here's what's going to happen. His peace from heaven, peace from God is going to come down. It's going to guard your mind. It's going to guard your heart in Christ Jesus. So So, dear friend, I hope and pray for you today, as I do for myself and my family, that we would rejoice today, that we would pray today without ceasing. We keep that conversation going, and we give thanks in all circumstances. And the peace of God will flood our hearts, guard our minds. I hope that's true for you. I know that God will do that as we seek Him. Have a great day, friends. We'll see you next time on the Cornerstone Connection.